What's up, you fine people of the internet? Robert Teagarden back again today with kind of a Teagarden tech something or other. As the title would lead you to believe, I have switched, gone back over the fence. I am a full integrated Mac boy. I've got several different computers and devices and tablets and things. I got one on my wrist right now, but I was searching around. I need more horsepower, and Mac's just not doing it at a reasonable price point. And so I started stumbling across the internet, saw a bunch of other creators switching from Mac over back to PC, essentially using these crazy high-powered gaming processors in order to suit their needs within the Adobe suite. So I did quite a bit of Googling, a bunch of YouTubing, and I figured I'm gonna try my luck and build one on my own. Doesn't seem like it could be that crazy hard, famous last words. I have built far more complicated things in my day. I put together a parts list, and within about 30-ish hours, I had everything I needed, from making the decision, you know what, I think this PC thing is the way to go, to getting ready to build this thing. So, got a whole mess of stuff ready to go. The last little bit was the case that just came from our friends at Amazon with the A to Z smiley box thingamajigger. And so now I'm ready to go. What, pray tell, am I going to use and put under this hood? Well, I'm glad you asked. Starting off with the motherboard of an Asus Prime X470 Pro. This one is supposed to be working with an AMD processor, which is fantastic because that, my friends, is where this Ryzen 7 2700X thingamajigger comes in. And this baby is the pride and joy, the whole reason why I am intrigued. 8 cores, 16 threads. You can't get this type of processing speed along with the other stuff I have here for less than $3,500 with our friends over at Apple. Got 32 megs of RAM here. I plan on upgrading that to 64 in the near future. I got some M2 memory from our friends over there at Samsung, the 970 Evo Plus. Next up, I've got this graphics card, the XFX RX 590 Fat Boy. All of this is going to be powered by this Corsair CX750M. This is plenty of power. I use that parts picker pickle peppers. I'm clocking in around 500 watts, so 750 will do me just fine. This is a semi-modular unit, which means that all of the cables in the back, at least most of them, I can plug in and choose which ones I want, which will be very special for when I start routing cables. Make it a nice clean look on the inside, which is definitely something that's important to me. All of this, hold on, is going to be inside this NZXT case. Rumor has it this is usually the first place people start when they're starting to put their PCs together. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this out of the box. The cool thing that I've seen is that you really don't need much in the way of tools for building these types of things. That's good, although I do have a plethora of tools. I think just a Phillips head screwdriver is really all you need, but I bought a couple of other little doodads and hickeys and things like that. They told me the front of this thing was somewhere, but I'm just gonna kind of tip this thing over a little bit, do this, and I know that I really won't have to touch this for a while, but I guess I've just watched too many Austin Evans, and he takes this out first, so that's what, oh boy, that's what I'm gonna do here. Watch out, GoPro. Don't get your panties in a bunch there, buddy boy. All right, I'm laying this thing out, getting rid of the styrofoam. Hey, ho. Getting rid of the plastic wrap. Hey, ho. Let's go. And look at that, a modest size case for a modest size computer. The reason I'm making a big to-do and getting this out first is that this little box here is going to have all the hardware that I need in order to be able to put together all the stuff inside this case itself. It's got a bunch of things for lighting, the HDD LEDs. It's got some cable ties. It's got a whole mess of little tiny screws and thumb screws and standoffs and all that sort of fun stuff. And then underneath here, I guess GoPro, this is your time to shine there, buddy. Here are a bunch of different cables and things that have already been routed. Look at this nice little deal, the Velcro action right here that allows us to get our cables kind of managed all up and up to snuff. First things first, gotta take out the motherboard. I am on concrete, and so I don't really have any issues in terms of waiting for things to short circuit. So this is what the motherboard box looks like. Very ecstatic about this thing. Looks super rad, and I'm really happy about it. Got all the components there underneath. If I open this up, not only does it have a drive, optical drive, not really sure what I'm gonna do with this because I don't have a CD or DVD, CD or DVD drive in there, but it's got a bunch of other components in here. It's got our I/O panel, awesome. It's got a lot of cabling. It's got our Emmanuel. So I'm gonna put this in here. Yay, super stoked about all that. And now, inside of our static bag, first thing I wanna do is take this out. Try not to go super crazy with that. I'm gonna put this down here. And the very first thing to do after the motherboard is out is to put in our processor. So again, running the Ryzen 7 2700X. This also has its own cooling on it. And this, is this actually the chip? This is the chip. Holy smokes. You're a winner, chip. Okay, and then here is our cooling fan. Holy bejeebus. And this thing, they tell me, already has, yep, it's already got that paste on there, the thermal paste. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna set this aside for 2 seconds. First things first, we gotta put the chip on the motherboard itself. Oh boy, oh! Okay, we're good. We're good, everything's good. I'm a little fired up and excited about this. This little baby is really the heart and soul of what's going on, the processor. This is what I'm really stoked about. So they tell me you're not supposed to touch this whole side here. These little pins get messed up and you are screwed up shit's creek, as they say. But really, as intimidating as this is, it shouldn't be that big of a hassle. We just have to kind of pin this little guy up like that, okay? And then somewhere along in here, we've got this little arrow right there. I don't know if you can see it. Right there is this little arrow, and that matches up with the little arrow that is on the processing chip right there. So apparently, if all goes according to plan, this should kind of sit just down there like that, arrow to arrow, and then get locked in, I guess. It's not moving around. I think I did that right. And I think the next thing to do would be to actually apply our cooler. So these little notches on the outside here are going to link onto this whole kind of security system. It's gonna lock it down. If I pull these little tabs in, that's gonna be what we need in order to make that happen. Install this cam lever on the opposite side of the M2 heatsink right here. So this would be where my M2 memory is gonna go. And so it's telling me to do it on the other side. So this cam lever is gonna go on the other side here. And so really, what I wanna do is just make sure, I'm gonna get down just a little bit to make sure that my thermal paste is making good, solid contact here. Reach down over here. Seems like there's good contact going on here. This is definitely nice and secure now. Next thing I'm gonna do is actually try and get this motherboard inside the chassis. I'm gonna move some things around just a little bit, but apparently from what I have observed, this is not too hectic of a process, really. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the appropriate positioning for our board. We want some appropriate positioning for our board. Now these little standoffs already exist. First things first is to make sure that our I/O plate or all of our little connectors are going to sit. Want to make sure that this thing is in nice and securely. And really, if the board, I know that the board is going to go in this regard. So I just want to make sure that my I/O plate, actually matches this from the outside. So if the I/O plate goes in kind of like this, I should be nice and solid. So let's do that first. I'm gonna swing this up so we can see it. And this should not be too big of a deal. This is really just like a push in and making sure that it's nice and secure. There we go. It's all coming together. A little trouble with this backside. There we go. So now that I have my I/O plate installed, the other thing that I want to make sure that I'm aware of is that inside you can see these little notchings, the A, U, and I. Right here is what I need to be concerned with. This ATX is what I need to make sure that I have. So each individual standoff post has some type of marking on it, dependent on what type of motherboard you're going to be putting in there. Since the board that I'm using is an ATX board, I want to make sure that these standoff posts all match up with the A for ATX. So now what I can do here is kind of wedge my little guy underneath here, sink in on down. I have my stuff on the I/O plate is all lined up on the back side. And I just want to make sure that the posts for the ATX board are lining up as well. And they are indeed. We've got them all lining down here as well. So now what I can do is I can take the hardware given to me in the NX or NZXT and make sure that the hardware here places my motherboard down. So I'm going to screw that stuff in now. The simple deal, I just want to make sure that all of these posts are lined up to securely fasten the motherboard down inside the chassis. So I'm going to do that now. So I've finished putting all of the screws inside the motherboard, attaching it to the chassis itself. This is definitely a job with a little bit of patience. The screws that they gave me are quite small. I think little M5s or M6s. And I have, not small hands. I'm kind of a brute, so these types of things for me are generally not something that I really enjoy doing because it's tiny screws, tiny things. Generally speaking, it wasn't that big of a deal though, because we've got one here, another one down in this area here, another one here, 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 here. This is just a post itself. So there's nothing to connect there. Man, I felt like Aladdin there, the genie in Aladdin. Exits are here, 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 everywhere. Now, I guess the thing is that it's nice and secure. I kind of tighten these things down. Don't want to over tighten them. I'm gonna flip this thing over, and I think the next thing to do would be just to get the power supply inside this bad boy before we move on anything further with the RAM and connecting things, etc., etc., etc. So let's flip this thing over, shut off my little light here that I had going on, and we'll start to put in our power. We need more power. So, power is going to go in the back, down here. Power is going to go down here, and you access it through the side right there. Now, the big thing to remember where the power is concerned is to make sure that the fan for your power supply has ventilation. Now this chassis has the fan vent on the bottom. So whatever I do with this CX750, I have to make sure that the fan is ventilating towards the bottom, because we always want to make sure that there's plenty of ventilation. Now here is a bag of cables. See right here. Now this is what I meant when I said semi-modular, meaning all of these don't come attached to the unit itself. I kind of get to pick and choose which ones we want to use, which is pretty cool when it comes to cable management. It's going to make my job a lot easier and going to look a lot better than if I hadn't done some modular or a non-modular unit is what I was trying to say. All right, so taking this thing out here. So this was the fan that I was talking about. It's got to vent down. So this is going to be the way in which we put this thing together. Now, all I really have to do is make sure that the mounting screws themselves are good to go. I'm gonna flip this thing up just a little bit, and we're going to put in our Corsair unit down like this. Again, it looks like it's upside down. It's not really, because of that ventilation issue that we were talking about. I'm gonna spin this around for myself here. And as long as I can get this thing screwed up and buttoned in, we'll be just fine. So I'm gonna do that now. I'll let you know if there's any weird issues. All right, so I'm back. I've installed the screws to mount up the power supply. I'm gonna turn this over and so you can see it from the top. This is what it looks like right here. The case, the chassis came with these hex screws. And so looking at them, that's what we're supposed to do. I installed them in kind of a cross pattern and tightened them down in a cross pattern. Not overly tight, but just very firm. And so again, the main thing is that I've got the fan on this side. That's where my fan ventilation is down here. If I could probably pull this thing out if it let me, yeah, like this. So that's my fan ventilation down there, and just making sure that the fan has somewhere to vent for the power supply. These things definitely get warm as they're kind of powering up the computer, so we want to make sure that there's significant airflow, or sufficient airflow, I should say. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that here is the back of our chassis, going to be showing you kind of the back of it, and here's my link of cabling. Now you'll see that this channel, along with these Velcro straps, is gonna allow me to kind of manage my cabling a lot better than if I didn't have anything at all. Also, this little channel right here, which I'll reverse this and show you in the front, is gonna allow me to run cables in a pretty inconspicuous manner. Wayne manner, as they would say on Crank Yankers. This is the channel right here that we're talking about. So inside this hole is where it's going to be coming out of, and I'll be able to kind of run all of the cabling in a pretty legit manner. That makes me kind of excited. The thing that I want to be able to do pretty soon is to switch these fans out. I may actually do that right now before I get too much further into what I need to do. I got some white fans, some white LED fans, just because I think it would match the overall aesthetic a little bit more. So I think I'm going to do that. And then next I'll start to run my memory, both my RAM and my SSD, M2 SSD. And then after that, install the video card and start cabling some stuff up. And pretty soon after that, we'd be able to power this bad boy and see if I completely failed miserably. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch these two fans out, get them to be white, and then I will check back in a wee bit and let you know how that goes. All right, so I got the fans hooked up in there, ran some cabling back in. Really wasn't too crazy difficult. I just really took notice of the way that the fans were pointed in terms of the direction of airflow and mimic that as I replaced them. So it seems as though the flush side was on the inside, so it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be actually expelling air out this way. That's how the original fans were, and I really just kind of tightened them in a cross-sectional way that I did before, you know, not this way, but across in that way. So hand tighten them, nothing crazy, just making sure that they're there, ran the cabling back down in the same manner and kind of marked which one was which, the top fan and the back fan. Just so I can kind of make that distinction later on. The next thing I'm gonna do is start to install my RAM and my memory card, my M2 SSD. So again, With the RAM, didn't go super crazy. Again, want to be able to upgrade this later on. Ideally want 64 gigs of RAM in this video editing machine. But for this, what I have right now, just being a little bit more budget conscious, I got 32. Still should be enough for what I need. Just want to be able to do a little more later on. Now, for these, RAM installation is always pretty simple. You just have these notches right here to be aware of, and making sure that the different sizes, this being obviously the longer size, matches up with what your DIMM slots are. The other thing, since I have the ability to put in 4 different cards, I have to make sure that I'm putting them in the appropriate poles. So I only have these 2 cards right now, so I'm gonna make sure that I put them in B1 and A1, or B2 and A2, right? So these ones are color coded. You can see this one's gray, these 2 are gray right here, this one's black. And so it's just a matter of color coding them and putting them in. This longer side actually looks like it's gonna go in this way here. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and put them in the first one, so A1 and B1. You gotta pull these little tabs back. Not sure if it's that easy to see, but you just gotta pull these little tabs back down here. Once that happens, you're gonna kind of slide your RAM in there just like this, making sure that it's in, and it should just kind of click into place. There's one, perfect. Now again, we want the longer side. Here's number 2. I'm gonna push this down. I'm going into B1. I put the first one into A1, just like some steak sauce. So there you have it for my RAM memory. That part is apparently done. Now, the next thing we would have to do is our M2 memory. M2 looks as though it's gonna go into this slot right here. And so I'm gonna have to take this guy out, this heat sink shield for the M2. So give me just a little bit to unscrew these guys. Being very cautious not to lose any screws. Moving my M2 heat sink. Removing my M2 heat sink. I'm just gonna pull this heat sink out and open up our memory here. Now, I've actually never had a M2 memory in any of my machines. I've had SSD drives, but haven't had this M2. And apparently this thing is fast as shit, which is why I'm super stoked about it. So it gives me this little finger notch. I'm just gonna pull this thing up. And again, this is going to go in to this little slot right here. Now the cool thing is there's this little foam bit right there. I know it's really hard to see. There's not a ton of light in there just because we've got the cooling fan is on top of it. But there's a little foam piece right here that's gonna rest, the back of your M2 card is going to rest on top of that foam piece. So really it's a matter of getting it down in here like that. You can see it, it's gonna wanna stick up something fierce. See it kind of bounces up and down. It looks a little bit like a diving board. Well, that's why we've got these guys right here, these small little screws. There's a standoff and then a mounting screw right there. Tighten that down. Cool, looks like our memory is in, our RAM is in. I'm gonna replace this heat shield for the M2. I'm gonna make sure that that lines up and place the screws back down where they're supposed to go. And once I finish that, I can stand this thing up, and I think video card would be next. And once that's done, man, oh man, it looks like we can start to wire this thing up and see how badly I screwed the pooch. All right, so let's review what we've got so far. We put in our processor, we put in the cooling fan for the processor. I swapped out the fans, we put the motherboard inside the chassis. We put our RAM memory in, we've put our M2 SSD memory in. Now the last thing to do in terms of hardware, as far as I can tell, and I'm looking around feverishly at all the stuff that I have, is to install the video card. Apparently, this is not a difficult process at all. If I had anything to guess, I would say that this slot right here is where our video card's going to go. Now this is what I'm most excited about in terms of my rendering. In After Effects, this is going to help tremendously, but it's also going to be a great service when I start to render my videos. I render using the Adobe Media Encoder. I've actually made a video about this, how to export your 4K footage faster. Where would it be? It's one of these things over here. And I use proxy files a ton too. Now, my hope is that I won't have to proxy my 4K files with this new build. But my render times through Adobe Media Encoder should be tremendously faster, not only with the cores that I have the 8-core processor, but also with this GPU that we're putting in here as well. Again, with this, how do I open the box? What's in the box? And so, here we go, more stuff. These are cables and such. This is a warranty card, definitely need that. And here, my friends, dressed in plastic would be our GPU, dressed in more plastic. Holy smokes, friends. Look at how crazy cool this looks. It literally could easily be a space shuttle just floating in on like a Star Trek Enterprise, something like that. Cool, that is crazy wild. I'm gonna place this gently down here. I'm gonna make sure that there's nothing other than just nice, neat packaging on this side of the fence. Okay, we got that done. And so apparently, we just have to knock out some of these slots over here in order to make room for our video graphics card. Okay, so I've got these 2 slots here. Now I just have to bump these guys out a little bit. And so let's see, what's the best way of us doing something like that? We've got some screws over on this side. Let's shed some light on this situation and turn this sideways so we can actually see what we're doing here. So I'm gonna actually move to the other side. This is me walking over. Okay, so I'm back. I've swapped these 2 things out, and the other thing I was able to do, there's a gate like on this little side right here. I'll show it probably in like a little B-roll shot that it can come up that allows it to be easier to install. So it looks like my bays are cleared. My gate's down in here. I can now see that these slots are lining up. Let me just make sure my thing's down here. Cool. And that just slides into place like that. Look at that. So now I just have to put these screws back in. All right, now I'm back here on the other side. We've got our processor installed. We've got our cooling fan for a processor. We have new cooling fans installed. We have the motherboard inside. We put the IO plate in. We put our RAM in. We put our memory in. We put our graphics card in. If I'm not mistaken, the only thing left to do is to kind of wire this thing up. And if I'm being totally honest, this is gonna take a fair amount of concentration on my side. So I'm gonna pause it here, and I'm gonna try and wire my way through this thing. And I'm gonna check back in with you guys once I think I have everything ready to rock and roll. Stay tuned. All right, I've been wiring for the better part of an hour, and I'm gonna try and start this thing up. Oh shit, son! I got lights. Fan 1 for CPU is on. 2 fans at the top are on. Well, look, I mean, at least I know this thing powers on. This is a crazy feeling right now. I totally just built this machine that seems like it's functioning on some level. Man, that's cool. So I have to do a whole bunch of stuff in order to get this thing to boot in any regular way. Really, I don't even have like a way of understanding that part in and of itself, but it feels pretty good. All in all, this is about 4 hours worth of my time, a couple YouTube videos, and less than $1,100 worth of parts. An 8-core, 16-thread processor with the 8 gig video card, 32 gigs of RAM, and this thing is at least on and moving, which means I can get the rest of this stuff going myself, at least with some troubleshooting. I'm sure that it's not gonna take me that long. Once this thing is all back up and running and I've got this monitor going and everything's kicking along, I'll check back in to end out this video, but there you go, 4 hours, $1,100, screaming editing machine. Ladies and germs, got the computer in the office, got everything hooked up, made the room look nice and proper, got the monitors, blah, 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 all that stuff is ready to go. And let me tell you, this thing is a screamer, folks. Had a couple different things where I had to go out and purchase 1 or 2 more cheap things. The first of which, I have a Bluetooth rollerball mouse, like I'm that old school. And it was having a weird connectivity with the back of the machine over here. So I went and got this USB hub, and it's got 3 USB 3.0s. It's got a mini SD and an SD card reader and a couple other knickknacks, paddywhacks. And this thing's awesome. I plug all the hard drives into it, and it's easy to have everything just kind of right next to me rather than reaching behind the machine every time or on the top, part of the case or whatever it is. The other thing is that that Asus Prime 470X doesn't have a Wi-Fi card on it. Go figure. So I had to fill another PCIe card with this guy, this Asus PCIe AC68. And as you can tell by the packaging, it is fast. So I had to click to an Ethernet, but I was running an Ethernet cord around kind of 3/4 of my room, and that wasn't cool. It was kind of a pain in the ass. So those 2 things alone put me right around $1,200 for this entire build. Now, the thing that is blowing my mind is that, as luck would have it, 3 days later, Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, that is a mouthful, came up, and what do we have? We have the new Mac Pro being announced, and unless you're living under a rock, you know that the price tag under this thing is a clean $6,000 for baseline entry computer. Now that is an 8-core processor with 16 threads, that is a 32 gigabytes worth of RAM, and that is an 8 gigabyte Radeon card for video processing. Well, folks, unless you weren't paying any attention, that is exactly the same spec sheet that I had here, and my build for 4, maybe 5-ish hours of my time was $1,200. All in, clean as a whistle. I'll put all the parts that I had listed down below, but if you're worried about speed, let me tell you, I do a lot of wedding editing. And so I do these 1-minute teasers for my couples, kind of like proofs from a photography standpoint. 1-minute 4K file that I edited, exported within 36 seconds. Like screaming fast, blew my mind. Yesterday I was editing a red 8K file in After Effects, doing a full tracking, full screen replacement. That rendered in the Adobe Media Encoder in less than 4 minutes. 8K, 4 minutes with full virtual effects and tracking and screen replacements, all that stuff. This thing is just a screamer. After Effects is really where I see the GPU shine, obviously because of the motion graphics and things that we do in there, and in exporting, because I export through Adobe Media Encoder, which cuts my time in half. And so it's really just a screamer. And so for me, I'm always trying to be economical. $1,200 for a spec'd out PC build, as opposed to a $6,000 Mac Pro build. I'm pretty happy with what I've done, and I hope that you guys are inspired to do this. This is really, like, I've heard somebody say it's like adult Legos. That's really exactly what it is. I've never built a PC before. I've built pretty complicated things, both electronic and not, and so this thing wasn't really an issue. And I hope that this video kind of inspired you and gave you the tools and the push if you were thinking about something like this to do it. I made this decision to build a PC on a Sunday. I had all the parts on a Friday, and by that same night when I started building it, you guys saw I had a functioning PC that loaded Windows and I could start to edit on. It's really not a crazy complicated thing, and I think for the money, the type of machine that you're getting, the power of machine that you're getting is really efficient, and it's definitely economical compared to some of the things that we've got going on. Let me also say a very quick word. This 32-inch 4K monitor is the best part of this whole build. Just the preview window alone is as big as my 15-inch MacBook Pro. It's phenomenal. It's an incredibly pleasurable experience to be editing on something that's that crisp and that large. Definitely upgrade. That was like 300 bucks too. Unbelievably cheap when you consider what it is. That's it for me, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe. Leave me a comment down below what you think. Blah 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 blah. I really hope you guys like this. I definitely enjoyed doing it, and hopefully we'll see some more of this type of stuff on the channel. But leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think. And thanks. Whatever. I don't know. I'm out of here. Thanks. T Garden out. Peace.